I'm Shane Sandon and welcome to the Boxing Coach. In this video we're going to look at your most common mistakes when throwing the 1-2 combination, jab, cross. 1-2 is the most commonly used combination in boxing. It's the first one to learn as it sets you up for a range of other combinations as well. To have a successful 1-2, you need to ensure that you're judging your range and throwing a good quality jab first. It's all in that first jab. If that jab doesn't make a good connection, there is no point trying to throw that rear hand, as that's not going to make a connection either. Find your range, make good contact with that, then start to engage the 1-2 combination. When throwing a 1-2, there are many mistakes that can happen. If you haven't already, I'd really recommend that you watch my video on the most common mistakes with your jab and also the most common mistakes with your rear hand, as all those mistakes can happen with this combination. Firstly, we have people leaning in when trying to throw that shot. If you lean in with that first jab, you're not going to make a good connection with this rear hand. You're either going to smother your range or you're going to take away any power from that back leg. Keeping in theme with range finding, if you're stepping in too much when throwing that shot, especially if you step in with that first jab and then try and make a connection with that rear hand, you will find you've smothered your range in there and then you're not going to get any good shot with that rear hand. Make sure you're judging your range properly and throw in that shot from a nice neutral stance, not leaning too far forward, making yourself exposed or taking away any power, and getting full body weight behind those punches. Stepping in and footwork with your boxing is an unbelievably valuable tool. However, it needs to be done and timed right. Practice it when shadow boxing, practice it on the bags, and make sure you're getting full extension into your punches. Then start to practice it with partners. If ever you're practicing any technique work with defences and things, make sure you're wearing a gum shield. Otherwise, have your partner hold pads up. Very valuable way of learning to judge your range. I'll do another video on pads, how to hold pads properly later. We'll also do a video on other drills on how to judge your range correctly and learn it nice and safely, so that when you do come to your sparring, you're not completely smothering yourself or leaving yourself too far apart. When you haven't learned to judge your range properly, very commonly people lean in with their punches. When you're learning, obviously you can be forgiven for some mistakes, but if you lean in and keep your weight on that front leg the whole time, you're never going to be able to throw a good sequence of combinations, nor are you going to be able to move adequately with your footwork. You're always going to be too front foot heavy and opening up a can of worms basically. So when you throw that 1-2, this is a very common one. People throw that jab and then try and lean in to make that second rear hand shot. That's because they find they need to make that range because they haven't twisted and rotated that hip. If you're leaning forward, you're going to take away any power from there, make yourself exposed, but you need to ensure that you return back to a neutral stance so that you don't get hit unnecessarily. If you find you've thrown that jab and you're conscious about whether you're going to make range with that rear hand shot, practice rotating that hip into the shot. It needs to work in unison with each other, in synchronization, develop good coordination with the whole entire part of your body, otherwise it's not going to work. Similarly to throwing single shots, such as the jab and the cross, you don't want to give any telegraphing signs away when throwing a 1-2 combination. Most common, lead hand drops before throwing that punch, then comes out, or elbows flare out when throwing those punches. Lead hand dropping, see I'm exposed for a shot first of all, and I'm showing my opponent what's happening. Elbows flaring out, leaving my body exposed and also taking away power from my punches. And that's right, showing you guys exactly what's about to happen, so you've got plenty of time to either get away or calculate your counter attack. Whenever throwing the 1-2, you want to make sure you're keeping yourself protected at all times. You need to throw a good quality jab, and make sure your chin is tucked down behind your lead shoulder, and your non-punching hand is protecting your chin on the other side. Making a good connection with the fists, wrists, elbow, shoulder, the rest of your body staying well protected, elbows in, protecting the body. As you bring your lead hand back and extend your rear hand shot, you need to ensure once again this lead hand comes back to your guard, protecting your chin from the other side from any rogue shots you don't see coming, and your chin is tucked down here, protected by your rear shoulder this time, with your fists, wrists, elbow, shoulder, all making a solid connection. Your body weight is nice and central, not leaning too far forward, leaving you exposed there. Following on from that, each punch needs to return back to your guard. So we've discussed how the lead hand needs to return back to the guard as you throw that rear hand. Your rear hand needs to come straight back to your guard here, pulling your rear shoulder back so you're standing in a nice neutral position straight after, ready to attack or defend, depending on what comes next. One very common mistake people make when throwing combinations is losing composure. It can be quite an overwhelming thing because there's a lot of things to think about. However, never forget your basics. Take things slowly and try and be very mindful of the whole movement before you start to put your speed in. What happens when people lose composure is they start to allow their chin to rise, they start to open their guard and just leave themselves very, very vulnerable and exposed to any number of attacks. The mistake I want to address here is the chin rising. It's very common in combinations. People can learn to throw the shot singularly, nicely, and their chin stays down because they're just focusing on that. But as soon as they think, okay, I need to start putting a combination together, everything else is forgotten. Chin starts to rise in order to see what's going on with your opponent. And then as that second shot comes, chin rises, guard tends to open up, lead hand comes back here, chest is fully exposed, head is up, ready to be hit. You need to make sure you're staying nice and tight with your defence and everything is coming from a good guard and returning back to a good guard. The more experienced you get, the more you'll have a feel for where your opponent is without having to feel like you need to open up and see the full picture here. Learn it slowly and then develop speed. Footwork is absolutely key to everything in boxing. Standing in a nice neutral stance obviously allows you to then throw punches and defend from where you are, but you need to be able to move in the ring whilst maintaining this stance here. If you can't maintain a good stance, you're not going to be able to throw any good punches, and should an attack come, you're not going to be able to defend adequately. Throwing your combination punches, so the 1-2, is a very easy way to start to lose composure in your feet. You become so hung up on what's going on with the punches, your guard, everything falls apart as we've discussed, and then your feet also, you try to move too fast and your feet start to flare out and lose composure. Remember, if my feet are out, my front foot is pointing directly in front of me, it encourages my chest to be open here, and if my back foot is pointing to the side or too far back, it limits my ability to rotate my hip into my shots. Feet should be nice and parallel together, roughly 2 o'clock and 2 o'clock in an orthodox stance, and roughly 10-ish in a southpaw stance. Maintain that composure when you're moving around and throwing that 1-2. Don't allow your feet to become too far out and lose that composure. One of the best ways to maintain composure is to practice, 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 practice. Practice so much that you become relaxed with every movement, and every movement is almost, I want to say subconscious, so that you're doing it without even having to think about it, but you do want to be as mindful as possible, especially when you're training, so that when you do get completely gassed out in the ring, or you have to react on an instinct, your body knows exactly how to do it without leaving yourself exposed anywhere else. Now that you know how to throw a good quality jab and a good quality rear hand, as well as moving around with good footwork and maintaining a solid stance, start to get creative with your combinations. Throw that jab, step out, come back in, 1-2. Maybe throw that jab, step to the left, throw the rear hand, step back in, throw the lead hand. Jab, step to the right, rear hand, jab, step in, jab. Combinations are endless. Get creative, just make sure that you do them with good technique and not making any of the mistakes as discussed in these previous videos. Thank you for watching. These have been some of the most common mistakes with regards to throwing a 1 2. There is a lot more to cover with this area, and I'd also recommend that you watch my video on the most common mistakes with your jab and the most common mistakes with your rear hand, as we go into more detail on just a single movement, which are also related to this. Obviously, if you have any questions, please leave a comment down below or contact me on any of my social media platforms and I'll happily help you out.